Guess we could get started. This will be recorded, so we'll put it up on YouTube afterwards too. Tricia, thank you for joining. This is JI Tech's IoT security webinar. We're going to be running through the importance of securing your network with the rise of Internet of Things. I have Sonya with me today. We're live and in person together, which is kind of cool. And so I guess we'll just jump right in. About me a little bit, I am the operations manager and part owner here with JI Tech. I've been with JI Tech for the last 8 years. JI Tech has been in business for over 18 years. We have roughly around 1,000 endpoints and users that we manage. And across our team of technicians, we have roughly around 50 years of combined experience. And now I will hand it over to Sonya.
Thank you. My name is Sonya. I have been in cyber since 2008. My specialization is mostly in consulting and business risk. In the last 5 years, I've become a trainer, but in my previous years, I was working with state and government, U.S. government entities, state of Michigan, state of Ohio, to help them secure their organization, their agencies. And then I also worked with academia, University of Toronto, University of Michigan, and some of my joys was working with the National Guard and helping them secure and train their soldiers and their airmen. So in any case, I'm excited to be here today, and we'll talk about what we're going to cover today. So we're going to talk about the challenges of IoT security, because there are many. And we're going to talk about network segmentation. You might not know what that is, but Scott and I will help you break that down. Talk about mobile devices and how that ties into your company data. Common errors that are happening with IoT devices, and some of the best practices. And afterwards, we'll do some Q&As just to get answer some of your questions. So our main outcome today is that we want you to be able to understand the unique risks with IoT devices in small business environments. We also want you to understand how come you have to secure your IoT devices. A lot of people aren't thinking about security when they're buying these devices to help their business and make it easy for them to operate their business. And then we want to talk about some of those best practices so that you can protect your assets and protect your organization. So we want to talk about what are IoT, Internet of Things? What are those devices? I mean, a lot of people don't know what they are, and we want to really simplify that. So as you can see, the list is really long, actually. This is just a few of the items. So security cameras, thermostats, speakers, POS systems, connected appliances, medical devices, monitoring devices, wearables, health trackers. Now, the thing is when we're going through this, I want you to think of it from your personal perspective at home, and then think about it from your business, because truthfully, you're having a lot of those devices in both locations, professionally and personally, whether you're thinking about your phone, your watch, whether you're thinking about your appliance. You know, I kind of basically like to call them talking devices, because you don't have to do much for them to be able to interact with you, and you're having your thermostat, you know, change your heat for you just by click of a button. So the simplicity of these devices are amazing. However, there's so much to them that we want to be able to clarify. Now, Scott, were there a couple other IoT devices that you were thinking of?
Yeah, when it comes to business environments, especially, we've seen a massive growth in industries like manufacturing and farming and agriculture. Actually, a lot of their devices are becoming more and more connected with measuring how much water is flowing through a pipe, or how much metal is being cut at a specific place, or a CNC machine, or any of those kinds of things. Those are becoming more and more internet connected, so that you can easily put files to them and also gather data about what is going on inside of your operation. So when it comes to businesses, we're seeing this growth of Internet of Things, where a lot of these old devices that used to be manually run are being automated, which is amazing. And then they're also being connected to the network so that you can gather that data and control them a lot easier.
Awesome, thank you. So our question to you is, what IoT devices are you currently using? So if you just want to put it in the chat box, we'd love to know what you're using right now. Maybe that helps us know what brought you here today, so that we could help uncover some of the questions that you also might have. So we'll give you a second to tell us.
Thanks, Tricia. Tricia says fitness watch and security cameras.
Ah, excellent, excellent. Okay, perfect. So we're going to talk about why we need to secure these devices. So we have somewhat of old problems with new devices. And so what we're not thinking about when we buy these new devices is that we think it's going to make our life simple and easy, and it's true. But we also want to think about how we reduce our risk. And as a business owner, you want to look at that risk landscape for you as you're trying to, increase your business outcomes, to have, operational ease for your staff. But there's risks. There's cyber risks and there's operational risks. And we want to talk about that so that we can mitigate some of those issues. Now, what we want to clarify is not every IoT device is plug and play. I would say, please assume it's not. I would say once you're buying a device, there's a lot of features around there that you actually have to stop and figure out how to do first before you actually make it operational. Now, it's probably not something you're going to think about because you were probably encouraged that this is going to be a really easy product to use. It's going to really be seamless the way it integrates with all of your other systems, and it'll make it operational really quickly, and your team will be able to use it with ease. However, that's not always the case because there's a lot of things that are happening behind the scenes. Now, the thing is that we are really experiencing the fact that this is a real boom in terms of the use of IoT devices. They're absolutely everywhere. In last year, there were 16.6 billion devices in use in 2023, and increased 13% to 18.8 billion devices. And so as we gave you all those examples of IoT devices, you can see that there's all sorts of uses for these devices, and they're going in, integrating in every type of organization, whether you're a vet clinic, a dental clinic, whether you're using it in your retail shop, or whether you're using it on a farm. So the thing is that it's everywhere, and it's creating a lot of ease of access. There's no question. However, there's also lots of vulnerabilities with these IoT devices, and that's what we want to bring to attention to you today, so that you can understand really what to be aware of when you're buying these or trying to add these to your business systems and processes to make your business operational and easier to do every day. Now, I don't expect you to understand all of these vulnerabilities, but I just want to bring them to your attention. I don't want this to necessarily be a technical session. I want to really simplify this for you so you can understand what you can do with this and how to take it away. And you're going to use an organization like JTech that can help you with the technical capabilities or the technical issues or the technical vulnerabilities in using these devices with your business. But when you're looking at some of the key vulnerabilities, when you're starting to add a new system and a new device to your organization, you have to think about the fact that it has somewhat to be managed regularly. So when you're getting a new device, it has to have regular updates. Sometimes even when you buy it, that's an immediate requirement. Depends on how long it's been on the shelf, right? And so do you know how to do that? Maybe that's where you might need assistance from your IT partner so that they show you how to do that, because sometimes these devices also don't automatically update. You have to manually go in and update them. So do you know that? So if you don't know that, you can't take that for granted, because an outdated, unpatched system is very dangerous for your operations. And then, is it having direct internet exposure? Do you know what that means? Have you asked that question? Now, this software provider or this device provider may not have clarified that for you. And that's where you have to really understand that's a business risk and a cyber risk. But do you know the components in which that puts you at risk? So that's again where that's the technical capabilities that JTech can clarify for you. And then your security features. Sometimes these devices don't have very good security features as you buy them. They're really about ease of access. They're not thinking about security. And unfortunately, that is really where we're at. We're getting new products to market quicker than ever before, and we're trying to meet a need of like ease of access, but that security feature is somewhat last on the list and not really first. And really, as you're running a business, you want to think security first anytime you're implementing anything new inside of your organization, whether it's people or whether it's technology. There is no difference. You have to put security on the front of your mind because that reduces your operational risk. And so then you have to think about your network. It could be an insecure network, depends on how you're connecting it. Again, do you know how you're connecting it? The other thing is that the components can be outdated, and especially what you're connecting to if you're using other systems, right? Some things aren't compatible. Lack of proper privacy protection. If you're handling company personal, we call it PII, personal identifiable information. That's a personal information that you have to protect. Is your data being transmitted through one of these devices? That data transfer and storage is really important, right? And then device management. Again, we'll go a bit more into that. Insecure default settings, this is probably number one, is that it comes with a default setting, and those settings are insecure, just out of the hop. So that is one thing that we have to be able to bring to your attention first and foremost, that you can't trust those default settings ever. They have to be changed immediately. And then the physical hardening. So that's again a technical piece that maybe not necessarily something you can fix or change it on, but just to be aware of. Now, we have IoT devices that are so vulnerable that we have breaches occurring more and more in the industry today. So routers, for example, everyone has a router in their home and in their business. However, cameras, security cameras, they're really vulnerable. And so hackers, these cyber criminals, are finding ways to be able to penetrate a network through these IoT devices because they're so vulnerable. And because individuals or businesses don't change some of these top vulnerabilities and pay attention to these top vulnerabilities, these hackers rely on that. So 75% of infected IoT devices are routers. So just so you know that it is a cyber risk by not paying attention to these vulnerabilities and not putting security them properly. Now, when we look at purchasing IoT devices, everyone is looking at what could we do to upgrade our business and, make our business, run smoother. So our question to you is, are there other IoT devices that you're considering purchasing? If you don't mind just putting in the chat box, love to know if there's anything that you're purchasing for your business that you think is going to increase your business outcomes. Yes, I can answer that. Dishwasher. I love it. That's perfect.
Yeah.
So, perfect. So this will apply 100%. So just want you to pay attention to this. Okay. So next we're going to talk about network segmentation. So this is really at the business level. So it's important to separate and isolate certain IoT devices from your critical networks. So when we're looking at, Spud, I'd love for you to give an example because you see this all the time.
Yeah, and the dishwasher is, again, yet another perfect example of a device that seems harmless, right? You can connect it to your Wi-Fi and it gets on and you open an app and away you go. And you can now control it from your phone. And if you have issues with it now, you can get it remotely troubleshooted, which is absolutely amazing. However, I have two examples where this has kind of gone a little bit sideways. So the first one is a solar farm installation. We have a rancher that installed a solar farm on their ranch, and we were asked, hey, can we have an internet connection for this? And we were like, yeah, that's no problem. Do you need anything specific? And the answer was no, just an internet connection. And so when we did eventually get their network connected, we landed up spending probably about 3 or 4 days and roughly about 8 to 10 hours troubleshooting random outages across the rancher's network. We couldn't figure it out, couldn't figure out why, until eventually what we found is someone in doing the solar installation had plugged one of their devices in wrong. And so because their device was plugged in wrong, it was causing issues across the rest of the network for the other stuff, and just general internet connectivity, right? And then the other example that we have is to do with the dairy. They've got amazing machines now that don't require manual intervention to milk cows and keep track of which cows have come in and how often and all that amazing stuff. But they needed those devices directly exposed to the internet. And one of our things is that we don't believe in exposing devices directly to the internet because of the risks associated with that. And so what we've ended up doing is segmenting this off onto its own network, so it has no access to any of the other network devices. That way, if something does go wrong, if that device does get compromised, your other devices aren't affected as well. And so when we're thinking about like a dishwasher, like we've got as an example, connecting it to your private Wi-Fi may not be the best. If you have a guest Wi-Fi, or even better, if your router allows you to create more Wi-Fi connections that are segmented off, creating an IoT, like an Internet of Things Wi-Fi specifically for it, is what my best recommendation would be. In my own house, I have a private, a guest, and an IoT Wi-Fi. Obviously, I know what I'm doing a little bit, and the technology I use is a little bit more business grade than home grade. But I know a lot of home grade systems even have at least the guest and private Wi-Fi. So connecting it to the guest Wi-Fi would limit what it has access to, but still give that device internet so that it can continue to function and use the app functionality that you're looking for without exposing the rest of your private Wi-Fi that you maybe have more sensitive stuff like family photos and your other devices, and maybe even your work devices that you bring home with you. You're not going to be exposing those devices to potential risk.
Awesome. Yeah, and then when it comes to Wi-Fi, we have to remember that you're having all these different IoT devices that are going to be connected to be able to do a certain purpose within your business. And within your business, you have to be able to ask yourself, does this need to connect to this network, or can I have this connect? Do I have to separate it and have it on its own network, especially when it comes to these Wi-Fi connections? So do you know that? And maybe that might be a question that you have to ask your IT partner, because the thing is that you would rather set that up properly on the front end so that, as you're implementing these new devices, for certain that you've connected them properly. Because even though you might follow the manual, you may not have connected those properly. And those are things you don't want to necessarily minimize in terms of the security of setting these up. And then because again, these devices are connecting to a network that has a lot of confidential data. It connects to your systems that help you operate day-to-day business. And as Scott was saying, you do not want to have one of these take down your operating systems because it wasn't properly connected and or configured properly so that you're at risk. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, we actually literally had a conversation about this yesterday. We have a customer who has a printer inside of their office that is currently on their private Wi-Fi because it was previously only used for private printing. However, they have some contractors and some people that are coming into their yard that they wanted to also be able to allow printing, and they were having problems because they couldn't see the printer on the guest network. And so we had to put rules in place to allow that traffic to happen. Fortunately for us, they contacted us and asked us the best way forward and how to do that, rather than just making the decision to allow those people onto their private network, which is awesome. I was really glad to hear that. And so there was a little bit of back and forth and troubleshooting to make sure that the printing was working properly. But the conversation that we had with the client is, like they asked, would it be better just to give the person access to the private Wi-Fi? And so our answer to them was, you could do that. And yes, that would solve the printing problem, but also you're giving them access to everything else that you have on the network. And of course, as soon as we put it into that context and the customer understood that, obviously the answer, they were like, no, we don't want to do that. So the best advice that I can have is like Sonya was saying, just ensure that you're at least having that conversation. You know, I can't tell you how many times having that conversation up front saves so much time and effort than trying to tackle it from behind.
Awesome, awesome. And then one thing that companies don't think about is managed company-owned devices. It's simple, of course, right? You're using devices to be able to do your work. Your team has their own devices. However, we require for safe handling of data for that to be managed properly. Now, there's a couple components to this, right? So we have managed company devices that are provisioned by you. So one, we have to know what are those policies around those devices, because if those devices also were helping you operate your business with those IoT devices, those are risks, right? So you want to think about those risks. You want to think about the device life cycle. So the policies that you have in place, right? And then the data management handling. So these are components that you might not have thought about because, again, you're just like, buy it, use it, and go. However, these are things that if you have on the front end, you'll be able to reduce your risk and stress. Now, Brian, we were talking about bring your own device. Now, a lot of companies do that. They have no questions with bringing your own device. Now, there is no issue with that if you're set up to handle that accordingly, right? If you aren't, it can lead to incredible security risks and possible increase of cybersecurity incidents, and also a high operational risk to you because of those unmanaged devices. And especially when it comes to a phone that no longer is part of your business because the individual left the organization. So Scott, you might want to talk about how you want to wipe a phone, for example.
Absolutely. I don't want to stray too far off topic, but we definitely devices is a serious one. One recently that we just had is actually also just even online accounts. The dangers that those third-party services and devices can bring to a business, I don't think a lot of people fully realize. So using your own device for business is amazing. It means that you don't have to carry two phones, doesn't mean you don't have to have two computers, those kinds of things, which can, for certain businesses, it could be a savings to the business of not having to invest in those devices, which is awesome. And for you, you don't have to juggle multiple devices. So there's some advantages there on that as well. But the risk is, if an employee leaves in an unfortunate circumstance where it's not amicable, there is a lot of damage that can be done, and that has been done when that happens. But also just simple things of downloading or installing the wrong application at the wrong time could expose certain data that was not even intentionally malicious. It was completely by accident, but we've seen it where, an employee signed in with their personal Google account and started sharing an Excel document through their Google Sheets account. And now that employee is no longer with the company. And in this case, it was actually an amicable parting, but getting that document out of their environment and back into our own was a nightmare, especially navigating the waters of that this employee is now at a different company, a competing company, and we're trying to determine which documents shouldn't have gone with the employee and which documents should have. And so it can be a very gray area. So defining those policies and having those guardrails up prior to an event happening makes life a whole lot easier.
Awesome, thank you. And the thing is when you're also implementing these IoT devices, having policies around how you're going to use those devices, who's going to have access to those devices. Because as you know, all these devices also have apps. And so that's why when we talk about BYOD, if you're going to have a managed device or a bring your own device, your staff are going to have to upload an app to be able to use that for the services you're providing with those IoT devices. I mean, again, my washer and dryer, I have an app. I can use it and start my laundry while I'm out grocery shopping. So again, everything is coming with an app. It's making our life seamless, but that means that is on our device. So then if that staff member leaves and they have that app on their phone and the permissions are not removed, then we have a concern, right? So we want to talk about those guardrails around app permissions as well, right? They're very important. You don't want everybody to have permission to be able to use these devices. And there's reasons for that, because again, you have to know what the purpose is of that device and where the risk is, and then decide, but make that a very clear decision, a business decision of why you're allowing that app to be used by that staff member. And it's not necessarily by every staff member just because it's inside of your business. Now, let's talk about some of these mitigating risks for exposed devices. So we know that default settings are the highest risk. So you're going to buy a device and you're going to need to change those default settings, but you can't assume that they're the best settings to use. Now, one would have to probably look at a manual, maybe, but also it's important that you just know that that is one of the first steps you can take. It doesn't take a lot of time. And what that means is that you would change passwords first and foremost. So what it comes with as a default setting, which means they give you a password to use. That's what we want you to change. As soon as you open the package and you set it up, change that password to a very secure, unique password. And then maybe you need to figure out how you're managing that password, because maybe you have multiple IoT devices and you have to create a new password for all of those devices. So then this is where we would recommend a password manager of some sort. So Scott, how would you recommend they navigate all of these passwords with these devices?
Yeah, certainly a password manager is basically the only solution that I have. There's lots of free ones out there that are great. Both Microsoft and Google have their own password keeper inside of the browser, and a lot of the times those now come with an app that can take those passwords onto other devices, which is awesome. There's also paid for solutions. Obviously, I use a paid for solution. We also use one internally here in the business. But definitely changing those default settings is something that's super important. Some devices are getting better about that. We've seen with like printers recently that, they used to all come with the same password that was easily Googleable. But that is changing, which is great for the industry, but it doesn't mean that that password is any more secure. Lots of Wi-Fi routers and printers now, they actually have a sticker that has a unique password to that device. The catch-22 is a lot of times that those unique passwords are some combination of the device's serial number, which if it's directly exposed to the internet is not inherently secure either. And usually fairly easy to find across the network. So making sure that those passwords are changed, and then obviously having a secure place to keep all of those passwords is super important. Unique passwords is a key thing in this. Having the same password to access all of your accounts and devices is not good in today's world. If that password gets breached in any one place, which may not be your fault, if Facebook gets breached, that isn't your fault or my fault or anybody's fault other than Facebook's. But now that password is out on the web for anybody to view or purchase. And so that risk is where making sure you have unique passwords across your accounts becomes so important. We don't know the amount of breaches that are happening, and unfortunately these companies, especially these large ones, keep them under wraps for months, sometimes years, before we're aware that that password has been leaked, and we don't know the damage that is being done or could have been done while that was happening.
Right. And the simple way to look at that is, you wouldn't necessarily have, you have a key to your front door and you're getting in your home with that one key, that key doesn't work on your neighbor's door. So that would never happen. That would make no sense. So that key is the entry into your home because that's your home and it's your private residence. Well, if we can look at each place that you are using to log into a password, using a password, and unfortunately, all of these internet devices are password accessible. And so we have to look at that with security first. We have to understand that password is the gateway into that system. And that system is the gateway to what? Your organization. And your organization is the gateway to what? Data. And what is that data? That data is private. That data is confidential. So you can see that is an inherent risk just because of a password alone. So we don't want to have a similar password for any single application you're going to use to operate your business or your personal life, because all of it's connected. So you really want to minimize that risk for yourself and your business by ensuring that nothing is connected by the same password that way, because then you can put up these roadblocks to reduce that risk. And again, you're knowing that that password is different from every other password you're using in your business. Now, one would say, oh, there's password fatigue. Well, that's where we're talking about a password manager. You don't have to remember a password. We're not asking you to remember a password. We're asking you to use unique passwords and use a safe third-party provider that pretty much has a vault and secures your passwords with encryption. And then we'll give it out to you when you need it. And they're really user-friendly. And then that way you never have to remember a password again, except for a master password to get into that vault. So if you need more information about that, JTech would help you and help you understand that and set that up so that your business could follow some sound best practices around password management. And then you could help your staff implement that so that everyone is following those protocols. Because again, that is one simple step to take in utilizing best practices for your business. And so then the next thing is that when we talk about updating devices, it's also important to know that you also have to disable certain services or ports that aren't necessary when you are using these devices. And Scott?
Yeah, so we're kind of diving a little bit into the technical weeds here, but if you think about ports as doors or windows into an application or device, so back to some of those earlier references that I was talking to, like the solar farm or the dairy, they have what at an IT level ports that we have to give them access to so that their apps and their services and their web pages are easily accessible from your mobile device. Now, the problem is that a lot of those ports aren't 100% necessary, or if they are necessary, they maybe don't need to be exposed to the entire internet. So one of the practices that we do inside of our business and when we're deploying any of these devices is we may expose them to, say, Canada via geo-blocking. We'll allow Canada to access those ports and those services, but we don't allow the entire globe. That allows you, when you're out and about, to be able to access them connected to the Wi-Fi here in Canada or something like that. There is the odd time we may make an exception for the United States, but we try not to. If we do have to open ports and services, we try not to expose it to the entire internet. The thing to remember when you do have a device that's connected to the internet is, China and a lot of those countries over there that are famous for their hacking techniques aren't thousands and thousands of miles away. They're a matter of milliseconds away when it comes to the internet. And a lot of times I like to use the analogy that, we're talking about doing updates. A lot of times these attacks aren't happening as personal attacks on you or your business. They're happening kind of like the guy walking down the street trying door handles. They're not smashing windows to get into the car and steal stuff, but they check the door handles going down the street, and any car that's unlocked, they take the money, they take the wallet, it's a nuisance, it's a pain. And that's essentially what they're doing. So if your device isn't up to date, they'll try that door handle, they may find a way in, and they'll attack that device and that network that's attached, but it's not necessarily personal. It's not like they smashed their way in. They just took advantage of an unlocked door.
Yes, exactly. And so that leads us to the next thing is that we want to have layers of security in everything that we're doing in business. And so one of the other layer is MFA, multi-factor authentication. You might know it as two-step verification. There's a few different names for it, but at the end of the day, it's just another layer of security for you as you're entering into these applications or quote unquote devices, like whatever it is that you're using to get into a system to operate your business. So you need to set up this security feature. It doesn't come with it automatically. Organizations try to push this out after the fact, but it's not necessarily always implemented. And if you need help with that, again, JTech can help you with that, but you're familiar with it because you do it every day always. So whether you're using a phone and you have to use Face ID, that's a two-step layer where it's proving it's you getting into that phone, right? CRA does that. They've implemented that. And I think it's funny the way they implement it, because I think it was because they got a massive reach. And so that they had to change their system so that they secured their systems better. But you don't want to learn that way. You don't want to learn the hard way by saying, we're vulnerable, we had an incident, we better step up our security protocols and secure our systems. No, let's do that on the front end where you say, okay, let's implement this layer of protection so that when you're logging into a system, that puts back, hey, is that you logging into the system? And you verify, yes, it's me. And this is the way when we will reduce the risk to your business, because if you're away on a vacation and you're getting prompts that you're accessing something that's a critical unit to a critical business application, and you're getting a prompt that you're not even logging into the system, this is the red light that you get to go, something's wrong. And you know, at the moment, you're at risk, as opposed to not having that layer of protection and then bypassing other security measures and then putting your business at risk because you didn't know. And again, you're not going to necessarily have guarantees with any of these measures because nothing is 100% secure. No people, no technology, no software, no process. But what we want to do is we want to add these layers so that you can reduce your business risk. As you're adding all of this technology, all of these software, all these applications, we can't necessarily minimize the risk around these applications, especially when they're connected to the internet. There's no border around the internet, right? As Scott was referring to China, Russia, all of these countries who are pretty much high threat to our business processes because they have access to the same internet we have access to, we have to put on our own controls and our own security measures. And that starts with the identity part of accessing these devices. And MFA is one measure that can reduce that risk for you to help your business run seamless. Now, the thing around that is we want to make sure who has access, right? So we call it identity management, but access control is critical inside of using these applications. You cannot take that for granted at all. Again, who uses it, when they use it. And then the thing is that what I want you to pay attention to is know when things aren't running smoothly. Pay attention to when devices are being accessed when you're not in operation. When you're having too many points of entry when they don't make sense. Or as I was talking about something from another country accessing your systems. There's a lot of red flags that you can see happening before your very eyes. And if you can also help your staff understand to question these random occurrences that may not make sense and not take it for granted, because these mean you're having something happen to your system through something you may not be aware of. And it doesn't mean you have to be an expert at all, but these unauthorized access ports of entry or access points could be a real issue for you. And that's when you need to pay attention. So don't take it for granted that is plug it in, go, plug and play, go, you're good. You don't have to think about it again. I would say the exact opposite. Anything fishy that you're seeing happen with these devices, that should cause concern for you to go investigate, especially when you are knowing the way you operate that device is during these certain ways, certain hours, and certain people. So if anything comes outside of those parameters, that's when you need to start digging in and going, what's going on? What's happening? Because that is where your system might be vulnerable, and you have to double check what's happening within that, because that is the measure you need to take. Because again, you're gonna do stuff on the front end, but you have to maintain it, and you have to look at this, and you have to know that this is vulnerable while operating it. Not just once you set it up, it's gonna run seamless. You have to make sure that it's protected and you're keeping an eye on these devices so that you are always running it smoothly and the risk is really low. And I can't emphasize the risk. The risk doesn't go away just because you've got it configured properly. And so, as we want to talk about some of the best practices, Scott and I will talk about some of these simple tips and tricks, but the list is somewhat extensive, but I want you to be able to think about what you can take away and implement here. But more importantly, when you look at adding a new device, you can think about these best practices, right? So again, never trust default settings, always change them. Implement multi-factor authentication. Keep your firmware and software up to date, and then disable unnecessary features and services. And so this happens sometimes too, Scott, where you're finding people are not paying attention to that, right?
Absolutely. So, I just going back to something relatable there with the dishwasher, maybe you connect it and you find after 3 to 6 months, you never look at the app. Going back, remembering to go back and disable or turn off that service, or maybe disconnect it from the Wi-Fi if you aren't using that, is often a very missed thing. We went to a company several years ago now where we were doing one of our network scans that we do, and we found a device that monitors their doors that they thought they stopped using. So basically they have a swipe card to enter their enter certain protected areas of their business. And they had a device that they upgraded, but we found an old device that was still on the network that they thought they'd replaced and weren't using anymore, that had been online, out of date, and not being used for over 7 years, and no one knew about it. And those kinds of devices are super critical. Those are the ways that they find unlock doors to get into your network. It's maybe not necessarily the new toy that you just plugged in. It's the one that you've forgotten about, that security camera you put up 5 years ago in the one corner, but you only use it when there's an issue like a break-in or vandalism or something like that. Making sure that that's updated and that you check on that regularly is critical. So personally, what I have both business and personal is we have scheduled reminders in our calendars to review some of those things. When I install a new thing, whether that's a robot vacuum, a dishwasher, whatever, I will actually review that on a regular basis to ensure that I'm actually still using that device for that service, and making sure that that's up to date.
Yeah, and I had a security service at my home and went on vacation in Mexico. Again, you have an app, right? You have an app with your security service and you have it configured, and we're on vacation, and then we get a call from a family member that the house has been, that one of our kids went into the house and there was no one allowed in the house and ended up having a party there. And I was like, what, how's that happen? We have an alarm system that would have notified us. We checked and we didn't even turn on any of those notification services, and none of it was notified for anything. It was all turned off. So I had no idea that we didn't even configure it for the basic purpose of what it was supposed to be used for. And I didn't even know until after the fact. So obviously nothing bad happened, but at the end of the day, just the simplicity of using that service and that app, I actually didn't understand how to configure it properly for that. And we didn't even have the best, and getting the best service from that particular security system as well. So just, simple things that you don't realize you're not doing can be really odd when you're looking at it from a personal perspective or professional services as well. So some of the other things that you want to pay attention to is security audits. making sure that everything is operating the way it needs to, and that's where JTech will come in. So when they're doing a review of your systems, they'll ask you the questions that maybe you didn't think about, and then also just testing them and checking them so that they're operating securely and everything is seamless that way. Making sure devices are on dedicated VLAN, restricting communications between these devices, implementing geo-blocking. Again, you don't want other countries coming, or if you're out of country, you have no access to that unit, those kind of things, or special permissions putting on it, enable built-in security features, maintain detailed enterprise asset inventory. And then again, just like Scott was saying, you need to know what you have in-house, just like you do human capital management. You know, you have all these staff doing these roles, and you know exactly who's working for your organization. You need to do the exact same thing with all of your digital assets. It doesn't matter if it's a laptop, and it doesn't matter if it's a security system. That all has to be compiled together, because overlooking that could put your business at risk because of these legacy pieces that could get outdated and may compromise other parts of your organization that are connected to that device. And then monitoring your device activity, just that is something where whatever it takes for you to ensure that you're paying attention to what's happening on that device. Again, maybe a calendar, maybe you put someone on that task where that's their job to monitor that, whatever it takes. But again, it is not set it and forget it. These devices need due care and attention to them. So when you least expect it though, systems can go down. So this is where configuration comes in. And Scott, you've seen this, where organizations have had systems go down and it wasn't due to a breach.
Absolutely. So, you know, one of the practices I've tried to encourage people on recently, regardless of whether you're using some kind of cloud-based service, whether you're using some physical device or something like that, is ask yourself the question of, if this wasn't functioning tomorrow, would I be able to continue doing my job? Whatever that is, right? So whether we're talking about personal life or business life, there's hundreds of different applications and services and devices that we will interact with in a day. Now, some of those devices aren't critical to your day-to-day life, and you might have a thing of, okay, you know, if this goes down, I can survive without it for a week. Well, okay, obviously that's not a critical device. But if you can't live without that for more than a couple hours or even a day, you know, really we should be having a conversation about what can we do to mitigate that risk. Whether that's backups, whether that's having a redundant system in place, or maybe a mix of the two, or just like we've talked about some of these other mitigating factors, segmenting it off and limiting that. You know, there's a lot of devices that we think need internet access but don't. So, you know, talking about manufacturing, we have a customer, they have a CNC machine. It doesn't require internet access. They like it to have network access, so that they can easily send jobs to that machine without having to walk over and physically touch the machine. But it doesn't actually need to have internet access. So when they approached us about that project, what we put in place is we connected that device to the network, but immediately put rules and routes in place that denied that device access to the internet, protecting both them and the outer world from whatever might be that we don't fully understand with that machine and exposing that machine. So they can access it from a trusted device inside on a trusted network, but that's the only way they can access that device. So there are proper ways that you can configure it to do that.
Awesome, thank you. And so then, you know, I guess a couple things before we close out this session. One is, I would say the first question you can ask yourself is my OT device configured properly? And if you aren't sure, because there might be questions you don't even know to ask, it might be confusing to even try to understand some of the pieces around what that's required. So I would say the easiest option for you to do is to call JTech and ask. Now, it isn't going to be possibly even a big issue. It might just be a few minutes for them to get on the phone with you and you verify with the questions you have, and they can do that over the phone. It wouldn't necessarily be a huge consulting fee or walk into your office and spend a whole day configuring the network. It might just be a simple pick up the phone, answer the question, and then you're off and running. But I would caution you to say that is probably one of the first steps you should take so that you can ensure that this is how you need to operate your business. It's going to become a critical business, part of your critical business unit. It would be worth that phone call just to ensure that you have complete understanding of what that device is going to do and how it's going to operate. And again, I'm really concerned about how much data is being transferred and saved through these devices. So that would be the caution I would also bring to your attention, is knowing the purpose of that device. It has to be secure. So making that phone call just to ensure, giving you a peace of mind that you set it up properly, is worth it so that you don't have any problems later on down the road after the fact when you least expect it, and possibly have your operating systems go down for an hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, who knows, when you could have had this prevented by just a simple phone call. So I have a question for you, and that would be, if you were to do anything this week to increase security of your IoT devices, which one do you think you could do as a takeaway that seems most feasible for you? A few of these here are somewhat easy, but which one would be the easiest for you? Change default passwords, create a separate network on IoT devices, update firmware, or conduct inventory of all your devices. So all of them obviously are important, but we don't want to overwhelm you with what's required of you to do for next steps. We gave you many, but as you can see, some of them are simple steps. Awesome. Change. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. So with that, that is all we wanted to cover today. So is there any other questions or clarification we can give you? Deep dive into anything else that we covered?
Feel free to come off of mute too, if that's easier.
Yeah. Especially if it's pertaining to something that you're doing for your business processes. This is a great time for us to help you clarify that.
I can see Shirley's just typing.
Awesome. And Shirley, for C, I just want to let you know when it says update firmware and software, it's a really easy. It's pretty much click of buttons. So it's not that you have to be an expert on how to do that.
No problem, Tricia. Awesome. Well, if no one else has any, yeah, absolutely, Shirley. It is crazy. A little while ago, there was a news article, I'll have to dig it up, about Wi-Fi thermostats, like, the data that they collect on you, you wouldn't believe, knowing when you arrive or leave your home. And that data is stored somewhere. And there was a case somewhere down in the States, I think, where someone managed to get access to that data and used it to do burglaries. Now, they were caught, and that's why we know about it. But the amount of data that these devices have is absolutely insane. So certainly is something that, as they move more into the business realm, is something that we'd like all employees and business owners to be aware of, for sure. But if you guys do have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, myself or Sonya. Happy to have a conversation about it further. And like I said, I would much rather have a conversation beforehand and know what's coming than try to play catch up, running behind, and trying to catch a problem from behind. So we'll let you all go back to your days, and happy to chat further if you need it.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Sonia. Appreciate it.
Okay, bye, everyone.
Bye.